The city of Miami is more than just a modern tropical paradise, it's home. This year, we celebrate the city's 125th anniversary and all the rich history that comes with it. Miami-Dade College's Wolfson Archives is dedicated to documenting every decade, preserving Miami's history and culture through film for future generations.
We've been at this for well over 35 years now.
We have footage from the last 20th century. So we're pretty much documenting everything in the last 100 years that happened in Miami.
Other institutions have really good collections of documents and photographs and things of that nature. But we are kind of unique here in that we have moving images, and moving images have a unique kind of a power to tell the story, since you'll have a lot of material related to the drug wars in the 1980s. You have material related to all of the craziness that's happened here over the years and crime and things like that. You also get a sense of what people were like, what kind of clothes they wore, how they wore their hair, how they interacted with their families.
It really comes alive here in the Wolfson Archives because our collections allow you to visit places in the past and kind of experience things that have happened here in the region that have shaped the direction that Miami has taken over the years.
Join us as we step into the past and discover how the Wolfson Archives has been chronicling the history of Miami.
Our creation dates back to the 1980s.
I have made up my mind. It is my decision, effective tonight, to step down as Vice President and News Director of WTVJ.
There was a television newscaster named Ralph Renick. He was a very important figure in the history of television, both locally and really nationally. Ralph Renick was the first television news anchor to speak of here in the state of Florida, because the station that he worked for, WTVJ, was the first television station in the state of Florida, and it was probably about the 18th television station in the country. This goes back to the late 1940s, early 1950s. So during Ralph Renick's career, he compiled all of the film footage from all of the different stories that the television station aired during the 30 years that he was with them. And he felt that, as many journalists do, that news is the first draft of history. And so his concept was, I need to do something to make sure that these materials survive into the future. So he worked together with the University of Miami, Miami-Dade Community College at the time, and Miami-Dade County to create a center. And it was funded initially by the Wolfson family. So the Wolfson family, as we know from having a very large campus, and one of the first campuses at the college, dating back to around 1970. The Wolfson family has been extremely important in the history of the college, but they've also been very, very important in the history of the community. Wolfson family was actually the creator of that first television station, WTVJ. So we have a kind of a common history with WTVJ and with the Miami-Dade College. As of 2009, we became the sole guardians of the archives. What does that entail? Well, it has all of the film footage and television news footage dating back from about 1949 through, I would say, the early 2000s. In addition to that, the collection contains material going back to the 1910s. If you take a walk along our gallery wall here, you'll see that we start from the 1910s with the very earliest images that were captured here when the community was actually coming into existence. And it goes all the way through there. The way that we achieve that, even before the era of television, is through various types of films that were created. They could be home movies that were shot by people. There were amateur films. Sometimes there were films that were used that were created to publicize the area for tourists, because there was also a very burgeoning aviation industry that happened here. All of that collection in its entirety came here, and it's under this roof at the center. We've been running, I would say, since about 1983. We initially were at the Miami-Dade County Public Library main branch. We were in the basement of that building. We've taken the collection, which at this point numbers about 35,000 hours of film, something like 23 million feet of film. We have a website where we are publishing something like 70,000 clips that people can watch. It's available to the community. Anybody can log in and watch the material, search for it, anything that they're interested in watching. But in addition to that, we are contacted every day by filmmakers, people like Ken Burns. We have a documentary on Netflix now, Cocaine Cowboys, The Kings of Miami, which used a large amount of material from here. Just one example is the rise of Muhammad Ali, who is really like a global figure. He's somebody that everybody around the world knows who he is. Well, he trained at the 5th Street Gym on Miami Beach for many years. This was where he became who he was. So we have footage of that, and that's actually being used by Ken Burns, the documentary filmmaker, in a movie that's going to be coming out this year about the life of Muhammad Ali. So I think those are all of the various things that we do to preserve the history. You don't preserve history by leaving things on a shelf and letting them rot and nobody knows that they're there. When we want to play something that's in the collection, we're playing it on equipment that's sometimes 20, 30, 40 years old. Sometimes the only chance that we get to actually view something is by playing it once on that equipment, and then we'll either have the tape failure, film failure, or the equipment failure. But really, digitization has become our means of preservation. It's the only way we can be sure that people are going to be able to look at this material in the future. Our strategy is to get the material out to the people and have them use it and make it part of their lives and part of the way they think about this community and this place that we live in.
We spoke to employees of the Wolfson Archives to see what some of their favorite pieces of Miami history were from the past 125 years and what moments in time, small or big, really spoke to them.
I'm the digitalization manager, and my role is to digitize the video and film elements from analog to a digital state. We have famous, people on footage. We have major events, which are really important, but I like the smaller, reoccurring issues, school board issues, where it's like teachers aren't getting paid enough.
And that last resort collective action be that the schools of Broward County be closed and that they remain closed until the teachers of Broward County receive the equity they deserve in the contract they are pursuing.
Well, that happened in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and so on. And it's just interesting to see that that issue just keeps on moving along. And, sometimes it's very interesting to think, this is a new issue. But here, looking at all of this, it's like, nope, this issue has been trailing us for a long time. And, that allows, once we digitize it and we get it out there, it allows people to look at that issue from way back when. Did we make any progress? Was that issue the same issue we have now, or is it different than now? And can I use anything that they might have thought of back then to help resolve the issue now?
As the archives manager for the Wolfson Archives, I deal with the collections, the acquisitions, the cataloging of the materials, and fulfilling requests. So any request that we get for footage, or if somebody's doing research, comes through me, and I make sure that I fulfill those requests in the best way I can based on what we have in our collections and what's available. So it's really managing every aspect of the archive. I think one of the more interesting bits of home movie film that we have is of a wedding reception that the family brought their chimpanzee to attend. And that was, I believe, in the 60s. So it's things like that that you don't normally see And they're really fun to discover when you're just watching a home movie reel and you come across something like that. It's pretty hysterical.
My favorite piece changes from day to day. Lately though, my very favorite piece, or set of pieces I should say, is the collection surrounding the Wrapped Islands by the artist Christo. Back in the 1980s, there were all kinds of terrible things going on here. I lived here, I grew up here, so I kind of was experiencing that side of Miami. And we had this Bulgarian artist and his wife come here, Christo, and basically kind of like eject something really happy, a really beautiful, happy moment into our lives here. Christo was a Bulgarian artist who convinced our city to let him wrap the islands in this pink fabric.
It will look like a giant flowers, and this is nice things of the islands. The islands, they are really small islands built just around the interwater coastway, and we became like giant flowers floating in that water for 14 days.
And there was a lot of controversy about it at the time.
I'm concerned about the cables. I'm concerned about water skiers because they run into seawalls, let alone pink floating stuff.
People on one side were concerned about environmental impact, and there were also people who were concerned about it being just a big waste of money and a big waste of time, even though the artist himself, this was typical of all of the projects that he did, he actually got the financing for it himself. So the city really didn't pay anything. This is all happening around a time when the city was really having some problems. We had just gotten off of a few really bad years where we had major civil disturbances that were happening here. We had drug wars and shootouts and problems, with crime. And so there was a magazine cover that came out that said Paradise Lost. Originally, we had a sense here that we had a little chunk of paradise in South Florida. And so when all of these terrible things started happening, we had lost that. Well, Christo comes along and he kind of like, reminds us of that, of what a beautiful place this is. And he did it through art. I mean, he wrapped these islands with this pink fabric and just made us kind of like take a moment to pause and say, hey, this is a really beautiful place. We have something special here despite all of the craziness that's going on. And so for me, that's one of my favorite set of pieces because it really set the stage for what Miami would become. And it was a pivotal moment in our history. It doesn't seem like much. It just was just this art project. But for me, it was a way of showing how art can actually change the world. That art changed our world here by convincing us of what a beautiful place that we have and really kind of like giving a jump start to all of the other art things that came along. I don't think you have an Art Basel, for instance, here in Miami and a Miami Art Week and things like that, without having had that experience with Christo coming in and waking us up to the power of art. So for me, that's one of my favorite pieces.
David also gave us an explanation and an inside look on how they digitize 35mm film reels and transfer it to actual digital files on a computer.
Here at the archive, we also digitize film. We have two machines. This is the Vario, and over here is the Choice. The real difference is the size of film we can do on either one. The Vario can do a 16 and 35. It's our main machine. It also can do optical and magnetic film, since we do have both. The machine has been built specifically for archives. It won't run the film through a sprocket chain. It's all tension driven. So a motor pulls and a motor feeds from each side. So it makes it a little easier. And the lamp, instead of being a heated lamp, it's a cool lamp. So the film literally, as you can see, can sit on it and it won't melt. With the film, like anything else, we get them in these little cases with a whole bunch of information on it. And before we even can start digitizing them, I need to clean them. And we have cleaning stations over here. We have Jeffrey working on doing some cleaning. Each film goes through the cleaning, which is, we use a chemical to clean off any dirt. We use new leader in it. And then we get it over here on the digitalization, all cleaned and ready to go. What we can do with the digitalization of the film is make a few adjustments. We'll run a little. You'll see that we can see an image. You see the frame lines, and we can make a few little adjustments to bring the image back in frame. And we have a wider image that lets us get a better look of what we're having. The film is running over the plane. We have an audio going, so if I turn up audio, this is about a couple hitting their 60th anniversary. Now this one, is in good shape, but sometimes we get films that are a little off color, so we can make slight color adjustments if need be. And at the end, we end up with the digital file that we can pretty much share with everybody after doing some transcoding.
As the Wolfson Archives reflected on celebrating 125 years of the city of Miami, their ongoing mission to preserve history, and some of their favorite pieces, Rene had this to say about the future of the Wolfson Archives and why it's important to preserve history.
I have heard from more than one person that Miami is a city with no history. And I happen to know, just because of the work that I do, that that's completely wrong. I see our job as making sure people understand that's just not the case. We have a very rich history, we have a very interesting history, and it's important to be aware of that and to be conscious of it. Not necessarily because you want to just live the way people did in the past, but it's important to know where we came from. What are the ingredients that came together to make our community what it is now? And it takes you a long way forward in understanding why people react the way they do to certain things, why certain types of events happen, why things that seem completely out of the blue take place. Well, they're not out of the blue. There was a root to those events in our history. So taking care of history, being able to preserve it and to communicate it to people is part of the educational mission of the institution, and it's part of how we make sure the people that come after us are ready to keep moving forward and to keep having a good life here.
For MDC in Focus, I'm Daniel Rodriguez.